So now we're going to move to our final chapter out of this semester, and it pertains to plant assets, natural resources, and intangibles. Now, that's the title of the chapter, but essentially, we're not going to delve that deep into the particular chapter. There's certain components that I'm going to stress and encourage you guys to know, and I think that you should move on upon finishing this course to the other half of this chapter, okay? And so really what we're going to focus about is plant assets, okay? And I may give you a little idea what natural resources are and intangibles. It just depends. But more than likely, we're going to just talk about plant assets, okay? And so, again, as you should be familiar with, these chapters are focusing on particular accounts now. We have an idea of the whole accounting framework, and now we're narrowing down on how do we address certain issues with particular accounts. We saw in the earlier chapters we focused on inventory. We just finished talking about accounts receivable. Now we're dealing with plant assets. Now both inventory and accounts receivable are both short-term assets in which they convert into cash less than a year. But now we're going to focus on these long-term assets, these operational assets. And so that's what we consider to be plant assets, long-term assets that are operational to the business. They allow the business to operate and function properly. And examples of those assets are those assets that last longer than a year. You buy them because it helps you operate the business. Building, furniture, equipment, things of that nature, right? Machineries, all of that stuff, those things that you buy to help produce and help operate efficiently are considered plant assets, okay? Land, to a certain extent. Plant assets, okay? Now, with the exception of land, all those other asset examples that I've given you just now that's considered plant assets, they get depreciated, okay? And we already have the idea of what depreciation is. We know how to account for depreciation as an adjusted entry at the end of the year. And we also know how depreciation affects those plant assets and how it's being reported on the financial statements. So all of that was already discussed. And so the main thing that I want to talk about in this chapter is how to depreciate properly, how to calculate the depreciation. And so we're going to kind of do a brief introduction on some of the assets and certain costs that should be included in the cost of the assets. And then we're going to end up focusing on depreciation and how to account for depreciation. Okay?